Blue Notes has been running, in fact almost since Blue Note started, we've been looking into this big question of, while banking and financial services are essential for any modern economy, banks themselves are not. Do banks have a future? Does ANZ have a future? We've had a fascinating debate with 4 really talented speakers talking about the major issues. What is it that banks have? They have customer bases, they have a lot of data. They're not very good at using the data. Their customers maybe are starting to lose a bit of faith. On the other hand, you've got a lot of fintechs and startups. The fintechs do things really well. They come up with innovative ideas, but would you necessarily want to borrow money to buy a house from a fintech or put your life savings with a fintech? They've got this sort of trust element that they have to build. On top of that, they don't have huge numbers of customers yet. They may have in the future. So there's a really interesting moment in time where a lot of fintechs are now saying, we did want to take over from the banks, now we can see we can partner with the banks. And banks used to say, why would we partner with someone who wants to take us over? Now they're thinking, actually, we can do a lot better with fintechs. It was a great debate. Have a look at these videos. There's some really fascinating insights.
So people are now starting to think about whether banks have a future at all. But banks have been the cornerstone for social and economic development for hundreds of years. They play a huge role in the economy, but the changing landscape of customer experience and customer needs is dramatic. There are so many new players and new startups coming in. What banks really need to look at and focus on is how well we can innovate and collaborate with others, with the new players that are coming in, to make sure that we're meeting the needs of the consumer. There is sentiment that there are other players that can do what banks can do. And so there's one thing that banks can do that the new players and the startups can't, is to be able to create and raise the capital. It's to be able to fund an economy is something of the scale that banks can offer that the new players can't.
A lot of fintechs like MoneyPlace have actually left the big banks to disrupt banking services. The company I work for, example, does that with personal loans. They've done it in a way that means you can get loans in a faster, more efficient way than the banks, plus at cheaper interest rates. The questions that we have now are around trust. People are asking what happens in a crisis or what happens when something goes wrong, and data is core to this. The answer for a lot of the fintechs is the same as it is for large institutions. It's about the people that we have on board and the technology that we're providing. Fintechs are regulated in most cases in Australia, and so we're subject to the same kind of responsibilities that big institutions are. But the people that we have on board, in MoneyPlace's example, they're top quality. They know how to manage risk, and they're looking at how to provide these services and how to make sure consumers are protected. Trust has been a core challenge in growing fintechs to scale in Australia and globally. It's a really difficult thing to build that out of nothing. So what fintechs are doing is they're doing that by the product that they're offering. If it's easy, better to use, and saves you money, and you can actually in a lot of circumstances interact with a real person, there's no reasons that Australians wouldn't trust fintechs.
But there's an ongoing debate about the role of banks in the future and where they actually fit. And I think sort of from the discussions that we've had over the last sort of few months, some of the really key points are that banks really have to learn is they've got to unpick all that received wisdom from the many centuries of practice that we've had so far and think about how we create value for customers differently. We need to recognise that we've had limited competition, so how we compete, how we fight, we have to go onto a different footing to what we've had in the past. And also we have to sort of take into consideration more recent revelations about issues within the banking industry, and particularly how it relates to trust, the impact it's had on customers, pushing them towards alternative providers of services, as well as the impact on the morale of our teams and how we deal with it as an organisation, and then what we need to do to really fight to become and establish a position for ourselves in the future. So for example, what we really have to do is we've got to be far faster in terms of how we respond to market changes. Our technology needs to be sort of far different, how we think about what value is for customers and how we bolt services onto other things that customers actually want to buy really needs to change. Our mindset around how we interact so it's seamless with what customers are actually looking for is something that will be very different in the future to what it is today, as well as maintaining that societal role of making sure that the money is flowing around the economy efficiently, that we are translating those deposits into good credit, and that we're helping fund businesses to grow in the future.
So working in the fintech industry, what we've seen is historically banks being attacked by fintech startups by unbundling them. So taking bits and pieces of the core business which are profitable. Everyone's seen the CB Insights diagram of Wells Fargo and all the arrows coming off it with startups taking pieces of the bank. But what we're now starting to see is a lot of startups thinking about how they can rebundle, how they can offer a variety of services, whether that's through partnering with other startups or offering their service as a platform so that others can use them to really be able to provide the services that banks have been historically providing. So what we've already seen is a lot of startups thinking about their business like a platform. So in the UK, Starling Bank has already started to offer their service through APIs and build their bank around this idea of platforms and building partnerships with other startups. And we're seeing companies come on there that are offering services like roundup services, lending platform services. These are all things that are happening in startup land, and they're happening at speed and scale.
Okay, well, we've been having a really fascinating debate with the community, I think, about whether banks are necessary in the future. And obviously, we've got a point of view on that. I think that the banks as we know them today clearly aren't. They have to evolve. And the banks that change and evolve and really get with the new technology and the new ways that our customers want to engage with us, they're going to survive and thrive. But the people who stick with the old, who continue to do what we've done now for a couple of hundred years, they're probably going to die. So yeah, banks have a role, but only those that really are agile and can make real significant change in terms of that customer experience, they're the ones that are going to survive and thrive. And when I think about that bank of the future that will survive and thrive, what I think about is a bank that really is listening to customers, is a step ahead about their needs, and that has the technology and the mindset to change, try, adapt, and continue to learn. And those are going to be the attributes and the capabilities that make any organisation thrive. In fact, banks no different than any other.